Of the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, chants "Death to America" on Sunday as President Trump reimposes sanctions on Iran. Taiwan says that it will consider allowing U.S. naval ships to dock at their military ports. President Trump alludes to cabinet shakeup after the midterms. Then we're going to do some poll coverage. And lastly, there is an article in the Daily Signal that illustrates what would happen if we went for Bernie Sanders' Healthcare for All plan. All right, so starting off today, we're going to talk about this article from Fox News, and it is titled, "Louis Farrakhan, Nation of Islam Leader Leads Death to America Chant Iran." Now, he was in Iran to do a solidarity trip. He was there on Sunday, and during this meeting, in front of the Iran state television, he leads the audience there to start cheering and chanting "Death to America." Now, before this, he went to visit the University of Tehran, the law school there, and he had them chant "Death to Israel," which, for those of you who don't know, Iran and Israel are arch rivals. And Israel is the Jewish state, and Iran wants to get rid of the Jewish state. They want to completely eliminate Iran. So, Louis Farrakhan is a known anti-Semite, and also he was caught saying not too long ago that he wasn't anti-Semitic but anti-termite. And a law professor from Harvard, Alan Dershowitz, said the following on Fox and Friends. "Nazis used the term termites to dehumanize Jews and accuse them of destroying everything good about the world." So, we have a known anti-Semite, and he is still welcomed in to the mainstream left. President Barack Obama has been seen with him, President Bill Clinton has been seen with him, and none of them have said anything to condemn his words or actions, same as Cory Booker, the senator. Nobody has said anything negative regarding Louis Farrakhan on the left. They still support him, although he is actively calling for the death of Israel, and he's over in a foreign nation that's our enemy right now, and they want to kill us. They lead chants on their own without Louis Farrakhan chanting "Death to America." But what's even worse is that an American was there, Louis Farrakhan, who is well respected within the Democratic ranks, started the process of them chanting "Death to America." Yet nobody in the mainstream media is covering this, other than Fox News, of course. But nobody on the left is saying anything to condemn him. And we just had an attack on American soil at a synagogue last weekend where 11 people were killed due to an anti-Semite. And yet we blame President Trump for his rhetoric, but we don't talk about Louis Farrakhan, who has actually called Jews termites and chanted death to the whole Jewish nation. Not only that, but death to his own nation, to America. He wants to help Iran destroy America and Israel. That is his goal, and nobody is saying anything about this on the left, which is completely hypocritical. And I can't believe nobody's saying anything on this. I really can't. And at the same time, the reason he led this chant to "Death to America," in my opinion, is because of the Trump's administration to reimpose sanctions after the Iran nuclear deal. And the reason they're doing that is because Iran has done nothing but broke the promises, and the deal hasn't even worked whatsoever. So now they've added an additional 700 entities under the sanctions that include individuals, banks, vessels, aircrafts, and Iran energy sector. This is from an article in CNN Politics. Now, the United States has allowed 8 countries to get a waiver so that way they can import Iranian oil, which is China, India, Italy, Greece, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Turkey. There are also countries who are opposed to the United States reimposing sanctions to Iran, and they are the EU, UK, France, Germany, are all against that, as well as China. Now, I think the only reason we're letting these 8 countries receive a waiver to import Iranian oil is not so much to help Iran out, but to help the other countries who may be dependent, or at least somewhat dependent, on the oil from Iran. Now, what the Trump administration is trying to do essentially is kind of pressure the Iranian government into neutralizing their attitude towards America and towards Israel as well. Not only that, but to try to force them to comply with what we wanted them to do in the Iran deal, maybe make something different. Because in the Iran deal, they broke it with 3 or 4 times before it even being enacted for 1 year. I mean, they were test firing ballistic missiles, laser focus, surface-to-surface missiles. The Huffington Post reported on this back in 2016. Also, President Barack Obama gave $1.7 billion to them in cash as part of a negotiation tool to return American hostages, which is against U.S. law. Secondly, what Iran did with that $1.7 billion is spend roughly $37 million of that on terrorist groups. So the Obama administration helped Iran fund terrorist groups while negotiating with terrorists to return American citizens. That is against U.S. law. And nobody talks about that. Not only that with the Iran deal, but they also got to dictate which nuclear sites the United States would be able to test. And I believe they even had their own people investigate the test sites to consider them to be good or bad. So all around, the Iran deal was a mess. And so President Trump did away with that. And now he's reimposing sanctions on them to put pressure on them to comply with what the United States wants them to do and what's going to be best for the country as a whole and what's going to be best for the world, because we don't want a terrorist-run government to have power, to have the kind of power to determine if a nuclear missile can be sent off. That's just not good. That's the same thing in what we're trying to prevent North Korea from doing and trying to make sure that we bring them back into a more civilized nation. So really interesting and frightening stuff going on with Iran, especially when we have a predominant individual like Louis Farrakhan chanting death to America in a foreign country. That's treasonous. That's maybe not technically, but it does seem as if it may be treasonous. And I don't agree with it, and I think that everybody should condemn this man, and everybody should be on board, in my opinion, with President Trump's sanctions on Iran, because they don't want anything good for the United States. They really, really do not. So we'll see where this goes as the tensions heat up with this. Now, transitioning over to Taiwan, potentially allowing the United States to dock at one of their military ports. Now, this came up as a question in a legislation conference, and it was more so a hypothetical question. If the Taiwan government would allow the United States to come dock a naval ship in that region, and they said for humanitarian purposes, yes. Also, if it will, help increase stability and security within the region, then yes. Now, obviously, like I stated, this was a hypothetical question, but it doesn't seem out of the realms of possibilities. And the reason I say that is because it isn't unlikely for the United States to want to set up a station in Taiwan, being that we're already in Vietnam. We're in Vietnam doing training right now. I want to even say that we're doing something in the Philippines, but we are in Southeast Asia right now training and teaming up with other countries, just working and strengthening our alliances over there because of the increasing tensions rising in the South China Sea because of the islands that China's fortifying over there and coercing and intimidating these other Southeast Asian countries to almost submit to what China wants to do in the region. So the United States could help that or could make it worse. We don't know exactly what's going to come of it, and we don't know even if it will be a possibility in the future for the United States to dock over there, but it does seem likely, and it may even be a very good strategy for the United States, in my opinion, simply because we'd be over there to defuse any heated situation that may come about. Now, there is talk within military ranks that there is potential for there to be war with China within the next, I believe, 15 years or so. And right now, I believe almost half of active duty members overseas have shed some light that they do fear a potential war under the Trump administration due to the tensions from the trade war with China, as well as tensions at the South China Sea that we've talked about on previous episodes. So we'll see exactly where this goes, and if anything comes out of it. Like I stated, I do think that this would be a smart move for the United States to maybe dock their ships over there, simply because it would give them a vantage point almost to make sure China isn't doing anything too nefarious. Now, switching it up a little bit here, going to the cabinet members that may be leaving the Trump administration after the midterms, which isn't something uncommon for a president to do. However, this president has already went through 8 cabinet members in his first 2 years that have either been fired or resigned. Now, one of the big ones is the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, on whether or not he will stay. Now, President Trump said, and this is an article from Politico, the following when asked if he was going to find somebody new to fill in James Mattis' spot. He said, "Why would I do that?" he asked. "Is that the new rumor?" So him and Secretary Mattis have both denied that Secretary Mattis will be leaving the administration after the midterms. However, there is a lot of speculation on whether or not Jeff Sessions is going to stay as the Attorney General. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina stated that there will be a new Attorney General likely early next year, as does President Trump alludes to that as well. And the reason that isn't very unlikely to happen is because President Trump has been against Attorney Jeff Sessions ever since he recused himself from the Russia investigation back at the beginning of his administration. The funny thing about that is that Jeff Sessions was one of the first people to actively endorse President Trump. But once he recused himself from Russia, President Trump kind of flipped a switch on him, and they've been going at it ever since. So there's been talks of potentially having Lindsey Graham fill the position, although he has stated he doesn't want the position. And if the Republicans hold the majority in the Senate, then it's very likely that Senator Graham may step up as being the chairman in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then the now head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Chuck Grassley, would move to the Senate Finance Committee and allow for Senator Graham to take his place on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And the reason I believe that'll be a better fit for Senator Lindsey Graham is because of his reaction to what happened at the Kavanaugh confirmation, where he ripped into Democrats and let them have it, that this was simply an obstruction and not, getting anything really accomplished besides assassinating his character during the confirmation. Instead of actually having a true hearing about it, they just wanted to throw mud on Kavanaugh's name, and Lindsey Graham stood up for that. And then he also said, he also is very committed to making sure that the Democrats cannot hack confirmation hearings like that anymore. And actually, at the end of this article from Politico, he states, let's see here. So he stated that he would no longer allow the Democrats to have a veto power when it comes to the circuit court, but they will have a say. So basically, he just wants to take away the power from Democrats to have any real power when it comes to nominating judges, simply because of the way they treated Justice Kavanaugh and his confirmation. And as we see now, that this very well may have been a political stunt of the Democrats, because there keeps coming out information that people have falsified their stories. For instance, I posted a story on my Instagram on Friday or Saturday night where the Senate Judiciary Committee chairman, Senator Chuck Grassley, sent out something stating that one of the witnesses who said she was raped by Justice Kavanaugh later said that what she said before wasn't true, so now she has to come and I believe have a hearing in front of the Judiciary Committee. So, and there's also another case where some tampering may have went down with the witnesses as well on Dr. Ford's behalf. So the whole thing with Justice Kavanaugh has really made Senator Lindsey Graham flip his switch and be all against Democrats when it comes to the power to nominate judges. So we'll see exactly what happens after the midterms. Now, this will be a perfect segue into what the predictions are for the midterms as of right now. And these numbers come from 538. These are their poll predictions. Now, for the House, they say there's a 7 in 8 chance that it becomes Democratic majority. And there's a 1 in 8 chance, obviously, that Republicans will keep the majority in the House. Now, there's an 80% chance that Democrats will pick up anywhere from 21 to 59 seats. All they need to take majority is 23 seats. And where it seems most likely that they'll take seats, well, the amount of seats that they'll take appears to be right around 39. That's the prediction right now. And that's in that 80% range that more than likely Democrats are going to pick up about 39 seats, which would put them at 233 in the House and Republicans at 202 in the House. Now, the Senate is a different story. It appears that the Senate will remain a Republican majority with 5 in 6 chance of Republicans holding it and 1 in 6 chance of Democrats gaining that. Now, there is a margin for error anywhere from 50 to 55 seats being held by Republicans. And if there is a 50, if the Republicans only have a 50-seat majority, they'll be fine because they have the tie break with Vice President Mike Pence if it comes to that. But it seems more than likely that the Republicans are going to maintain majority with 51 seats, with the Democrats retaining 49 seats. And lastly, going to the governor races that are going on right now, and the predictions, it appears that 195 million people are going to be remained under or switched over to Democratic governorships, whereas 134 million people will remain or switch over to Republican governorships. So that equals out to about 24 states being led by a Democratic governor and 26 states being led by a Republican governor. Now, in my state, Ohio, there's a very close race. This is one of the toss-ups for the governorships. It's Cordray versus DeWine. And right now, Cordray has a 1.5 lead over Mike DeWine. So, people in Ohio, be sure to go out and vote. My vote is for Mike DeWine for governor. So, we'll see how that goes. It's a very close race in Ohio, and I'm sure there's a lot of other close races going on. So, don't forget to vote tomorrow. Remember, it is very important to go out and vote. Seriously. So, and also, I just want to add that don't follow the crowd. If you individually don't feel that your values align with a political party, don't be afraid to deviate from that, to do something that suits your needs. Don't be intimidated or don't feel that you'll be made fun of for voting something that goes against your friends' beliefs or your family's beliefs. Be you. Be true to who you are, and try to elect people and parties that line up with your values and not other people's values. Worry about you when it comes to voting. And make sure that they believe in what you believe in, because they're supposed to be representing you and I. So, don't forget to vote tomorrow. All right. Now, lastly, this is an article from the Daily Signal, and it is titled, "Some State Officials Want to Adopt Bernie-Style Healthcare. Here's what it'll cost." So this is a short little article, and I'll go ahead and read it for you guys. Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent from Vermont, has not let up in his push for single-payer health care, and some state legislatures are matching his proposal. Earlier this year, Sanders introduced a big and comprehensive Medicare for All proposal that would create a government-controlled healthcare system at the national level. The plan has gained momentum among Democrats, but has also slammed into a fiscal reality check. 3 independent estimates from a diverse range of healthcare economists and policy analysts have highlighted the enormous additional cost of Sanders' proposal. The liberal Urban Institute estimated that 10-year cost would amount to a stunning $32 trillion. That is larger than the national debt right now. While the conservative Mercatus Center at George Mason University put the estimated total at $32.6 trillion. Professor Kenneth Thrope of Emory University, a former advisor of President Bill Clinton, used a different set of assumptions and the set 10-year price tag at $24.7 trillion. Charles Blohorst of the Mercatus Center set his own estimate at $32.6 trillion, estimate made generous concessions for the purposes of calculation, and he accepted Sanders' assumption that the proposal would also generate savings, such as massive payment reductions to doctors and other medical professions. Balhurst added that the more realistic assumption underlining estimates of Sanders' legislation would likely push the taxpayer price tag even higher than $32.6 trillion. Three independent assessments for Medicare for All are very much in line with assessments of state versions of the bill. The bottom line, three proposals all cost taxpayers big money. For example, the James Madison Institution in Florida found that if the state legislation enacted a state taxpayer program, it would have to increase its sales tax from the current 6% to 39%. So they would have to increase their taxes by 33% to pay for this universal health care just in the state of Florida. That is insane. But yet, let's keep pushing the idea. Back to the article. A number of state budget officials have produced costs estimated for various state-based single-payer proposals. For example, the Maryland Department of Legislation Affairs found that the enactment of a single-payer proposal in Maryland would cost taxpayers $24 billion per year. To put that in perspective, the Baltimore Sun points out that the total operating budget for Maryland is $44 billion. So, over half of Maryland's budget would be given towards Medicare for All, which then means that, guess what? It's going to increase over time, and then people are going to need to pay more in taxes. Continuing, in North Carolina, legislators were sponsoring a single-payer bill withdrew it from consideration after the North Carolina General Assembly Fiscal Research Division found that the total cost of the proposal would hit $72 billion, of which the state would bear $41.9 billion in costs. As the News and Observers noted, that the new financial obligation would nearly double the current general fund budget, which means what? More taxes. More of your paycheck would be going to the government. And then you're hoping that they're going to be doing a good job with your health care. But they don't do a good job with anything, really, when it comes down to it. There's some things they do well on, but do we really want to trust them with health care? Seriously? Continuing. Officials in Sanders' home state of Vermont tried to make their state the first in the nation to create a single-payer healthcare system. The ambitious proposal died after the costs were made known. According to an official state analysis, the proposal would have cost a total of $4.3 billion, with the state costs reaching $2.6 billion. As the Boston Globe noted, the entire Vermont budget in 2015 was just $4.9 billion. The state would have to increase the state personal income tax to 9.5% and add an 11.5% payroll tax. Holy crap. So they estimated that the healthcare budget would exceed or come close to the entire Vermont state budget right now. Holy cow. Yet they still think it's a wonderful idea. So that's pretty much where the article concludes, and it just goes off and saying that it's really not a good idea for this proposal to take place. Now, that's all we have for today's news. I hope you all enjoyed the episode. And like always, if you have any suggestions on a topic you would like me to do, please let me know and I'd be happy to do so. And last thing I want to leave you guys with before I take off here, I may or may not be able to make an episode tomorrow because I will be volunteering at the election polls here in Ohio. So depending on my time, I may or may not be able to be able to make the podcast. I'll keep you guys posted when it comes to that. Otherwise, more than likely, I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.